The nonprofit MBA purpose is to provide new business insights and fresh creative ideas for executive directors and their teams that will help them improve their organization. Here is your host, Stephen Halasnik.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Stephen Halasnik. I will be your host for today's Nonprofit MBA podcast. I am, for those of you who don't know me, I am co-founder of Financing Solutions. And over the last 12 years, Financing Solutions is the leading provider in the United States of lines of credit for small nonprofits. Yes, there's a company that specifically provides lines of credit to people like yourselves. And we've been doing it for a while. We're really good at it. Our clients love the product, and it's a good thing to have in place just in case. If you're interested in learning more about the line of credit for your organization, please visit us at nonprofitmbapodcast.com. Today, we also have a sponsor, Araize. It's spelled Araize. I really believe in this company. I actually use it for one of the nonprofits that I'm on the board on. Araize is accounting software that's specifically made for small to medium size organizations. It's specifically designed for nonprofits. So if you're using something like QuickBooks or something else that's not made for a nonprofit, so it's like a square peg in a round hole type of scenario. If you're interested in learning more about Araize, please visit their website at araize.com or call them, and you can ask for Joe at 866-840-7449 and tell Joe that Steven sent you. Today, I am very excited to be speaking with Matt Nash from the Blackbaud Giving Fund. Matt is the executive director of the Blackbaud Giving Fund, leading the organization's mission to unleash generosity by connecting people to causes they care about around the world. An experienced executive with focus on customer relationships, he previously served as the executive director of the Generosity Commission working group, where he continues to volunteer, focusing on implementing a research agenda aimed at more deeply understanding generosity in America. Previously, he was Senior Vice President of Marketing and Donor Experience at Fidelity Charitable, where he studied donor behavior and worked to make giving accessible, simple, and effective. An expert donor in donor advised funds and philanthropy, Matt is an advocate for local public education, having served as a foundation president funding innovative education programs and on the board of advisors for District C, a nonprofit that brings students together across schools to solve real problems of local businesses. Matt, welcome to today's Nonprofit MBA podcast.
Well, Stephen, it's my pleasure to join you.
Yeah, I usually don't read a long bio. I usually limit it to 5 sentences. But in your case, I really liked your bio, and so I said, let me kind of give our audience a good in-depth of your career. And today we're going to be talking about key ways nonprofits can engage with current and potential donors. And if you had to put just say one word or one sentence in the key way that nonprofits can engage with current and potential donors, what would you say?
Know the donor and know how they behave and how they like to behave, I think is what it really boils down to, which is where I spent a lot of my time as leading efforts to focus on donors. I'm always trying to connect the donor to the nonprofits. And as I was doing that, I was learning an awful lot about how donors think and what they're doing and why they're doing it. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think there's a side benefit other than really. I hate to say the word. I'm a salesman by nature, saying closing the deal, but it sure makes business a lot more fun, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, when do you? Go ahead, finish up.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you know people, if you know how they think, you can design things, you can react to them, you can help them, you can allow them to do what they want to do in a way that resonates with them. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think you probably should put together a list of questions that you want to get at almost every meeting with somebody. Like some of the ones I would think of is how many kids they have, how old are they, why is this person potentially interested in making a donation? Um, and this, off the top of my head, where do they live? What do they like to do when they're not? Well, what do they like to do? Right? These are all, and then there's other things, where did they grow up, and what do they like to do now, and you get a flavor for the person as a person. Would you agree with that?
I think so. Yes. In addition to all the other things that have to be done, right? I had a conversation with a good friend of mine who's a very successful fundraiser for a large organization, and we were talking at the time about the databases and how you track people and figure out what their trends are and all that. And we got done with the conversation, and she said, Matt, when all that's done, now you're to the point where what fundraisers are really supposed to do, which is to inspire, help the donors achieve what they're inspired to achieve.
Yeah.
And it's hard to know how to do that until you get to know who they are. Even if you can't know them as individuals, as long as if you can know them as sort of categories and groups. Like for instance, we deal with a lot of employees because Blackbaud Giving Fund supports workplace giving. And one of the things that we've learned about that is that many of these employees have never really pulled the trigger on a donation that was their own choice. They would maybe, in their younger lives, they may have done something supporting what the family's always done or what the school are involved with is involved with. But then when they get to workplace giving, it's like, okay, it's open for you to give to who you want to give to. And that's a shift in them. And knowing that as a provider, it helps you figure out how to appeal to them, right? Because it's their first time. So what's important for their first time? Well, let's get them to let's introduce ourselves to them so that they get to know us and what are experiences we can create for them that would allow them to see the great work that we do as a nonprofit, because you're starting that process of trying to connect with them, starting that process of helping them see how you can support something that is important to them.
Yeah, I think the big mistake that a lot of people do, they go in there and they right off the bat start telling the listener or the potential donor about the organization. And I don't think it shouldn't start off with that at all, should it?
Should start out with at least, what are you looking to do?
Yeah.
What do you want to support? And
what brings you here today?
Right.
Yeah.
What brings you here today? And how can how does our mission line up with yours?
Yeah. Because,
right?
the selfish part of it too is you might spout out all this information and say something that the person doesn't like. Right?
Or start off on the wrong foot and go in a different direction that they weren't expecting. Right?
Yeah. I mean, people want to be heard. They want to be listened to, right? And if you go in there and you're the one doing all the talking, you're not really listening, are you?
Yeah. Now, here's a challenge that I see is that, we are dealing with, we have 8.4 million employees on this platform.
Yeah.
The nonprofits are trying to figure out, all right, who are all these folks and which ones can appeal to, which ones would us connect together with. And that starts a journey of trying to define just some basics that get to, like a real simple level. And one of them is, all of these programs that are now people are using to give are involving some sort of intermediary system. Like, there's platforms that people use. It's, PayPal Giving Fund and all these other type funds, and they all operate in a very similar way, right? They put together a database of nonprofits that these donors can go search through and see which ones line up with them. And on the nonprofit side, they give them the opportunity to tell something about themselves. But if the nonprofits are really busy because they're trying to work on all their different campaigns and programs that they have, sometimes it's hard to take the time and know how important it is to present yourself, to present your story in a way that would resonate with somebody. And I think that's a key component of it too, because before you get the chance to interact with them, there's a research point or research process that's going on, or a connection process where the donors are looking for who to give to. If they're working for a company, the company might be helping them with saying, hey, we're doing a give back day or a volunteer day in September. And so here's the kinds of things that we're going to get our employees involved with. And so now employees are beginning to self-select which one do they want to participate in. Do they want to go, work on the project to help somebody clean up a park, or do they want to, help a nonprofit put together a website? And those differences then begin separating out the donors, and the nonprofits are in a position to have to start by defining who they are, defining what they do and how they operate, so that there's some basic information that donors can use to help them figure out where they want to give.
What is the average donation that one of your donors gives?
In a given year, a typical employee will give about $825, and then that's matched with a corporate match to on average gets that $825 donation up to about $1,200. Now that wouldn't be one that wouldn't necessarily be one donation. That's like what they would give in a year.
Yeah. So I mean, honest, I think I kind of misunderstood a little bit about what your organization does. I thought it was much, but today's conversation is more, was more geared toward, I thought, higher level donors, so that you can spend a lot of time with them. But in your case, you can't do that, can you?
No, it's tough. It's you can spend a lot of time with the companies that these nonprofits work with, because the companies are creating a program. They call it corporate social responsibility, CSR. And what they're doing is they're building programs that employees will engage in, and creates a better loyalty from the employees. That's really a bottom line component here to it. 70% of employees want to work for a company that's doing some good, creating some sort of impact. And so the nonprofits can get to know these employers by what kinds of programs they're offering, and align the nonprofit capabilities like volunteer opportunities and things to tie closer to those employers, because the employer's group that's running this program is maybe a 2 or 3 person team for a 50,000 employee organization, and they need to create campaigns that they can leverage and make available to their employees, and they want to do really good work, and they want their employees to be really engaged. So it's a dance between the employer, the nonprofit, and then the employees.
Who's the typical liaison of the person that you would talk to at the company?
It would be a person that's in charge of their corporate social responsibility activities. Sometimes that person works in the HR function. Sometimes they'll work in a more of a corporate staff group of some kind, and their job is to promote this kind of work for the employees, and also to help improve the brand and image of the company, particularly in the local communities. Sometimes you have large corporations that have operations all over the country. They might be operating in 15, 20 different states, and in each state, what they'll do is they'll work to create how they give back to those local communities in that state, and what kind of impact that they can drive to help whatever the social issue is that they're working on, whether it's early childhood education, or poverty, or education. Sometimes it's tied close to the company's mission. Sometimes it's just more around what they want to help the key problems that are in the communities that they operate.
So is the title of, like, let's say you're listening to this today, and you'd say, I'd really like to get on with this company or this other company do they go, who would they would call the director of corporate responsibility? What
How,
is there?
how do they find the person is really the
Yeah.
question you're asking,
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's probably is a challenge sometimes. But most corporations in their annual reports, they have a environmental, social, and governance chapter in their, ESG is a big issue these days. And usually the give back components and the impact that they're trying to have is included in that particular strategy. So a lot of times you can find the name of the individual who's operating those programs through the documentation that the company provides around that stuff. The other area that I see is that, when large numbers of employees will work, and give to one organization, suddenly that organization's getting donations from a number of people with the dot, com component that's the same, right, as IBM.com or um, Dell.com. And if you see that you have a lot of employees that are giving to you at one time, you know that that's coming through some program like this, and you could literally contact any of those employees and say, how do I talk to the person who's organizing all this for you guys, because I'd like to get closer to you. So I think that's a way to kind of come into the corporate side of it, and be able to start that relationship with the corporation, which then gives you access to all their employees who would be interested in giving to you.
The nonprofits that are part of the Blackbaud Giving Fund, right? So I'm just let me paraphrase here and edit, not paraphrase, but let me make sure my dots are being connected here. Your organization connects corporations and the employees with nonprofits.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
And so therefore the nonprofits that are part of your organization, what have you seen that the successful ones do in their and how they present themselves on your platform? What have you seen that the really good ones do?
Yeah, I think there's a series of steps. It starts with, as we started out our conversation today, of defining who you are. And so on that, let's just talk that through first. So first of all, there's a platform available to these employees, and that platform allows the nonprofits to say a little bit about themselves. What their mission is, what the kind of impact they have, where they operate, what their constituency is like, all those kinds of things. Now that can get to be complicated because every one of these organizations that run these kind of programs has some sort of platform. But there is one sort of central group that many of them draw from, which is GuideStar. So, GuideStar is a very common.
They have their 990s and everything there.
They got the 990s in there, and GuideStar has, from bronze up through platinum in terms of levels that you can go. So I would start there and say, is my GuideStar profile, do I feel good about it? Does it represent who we are and what we're trying to do? Because that information will flow through to many of these platforms. So if there's one point of maximum leverage, it would be that for any nonprofit, because I know nonprofits are very stretched and very busy. I think that's a really good place to start. Then from there, what you would want to do is try to get an understanding of where the donors are coming from. So in your database, you're going to have these employees that are giving, and every group, every organization like Blackbaud Giving Fund that runs a program like this operates very similarly. You'll get an ACH or a check, funding, and behind that somewhere is the information about who gave. So there's Stephen with his address and Matt with my address. Usually it's an email, and all those emails would be coming from the same IP, or the same identification in terms of the corporation. So you can begin to get a sense of, well, are there corporations that are already involved with me in a way that I'm not even aware of? And I think that's another good start. That same concept applies for just, the retail DAF. Like when I was working with Fidelity, a lot of times I would work with nonprofits and say, look, there's lots of donor advised fund donors already in your system. You just need to look to find them. And when you understand who they are, then you can begin appealing to them. And that brings you to stage 2, right? Stage 2 is classic stewardship. Thank them for participating. You know how they came in. An employee who gives to you for the first time is doing it intentionally. It's not something that came, as their friend said, "Hey, I'm running in the run tomorrow. Would you, give me $50 to donate?" Through these programs, most of these people are saying, "Well, what's important to me? What are the organizations I would like to give to?" And so you're, as a nonprofit, seeing these people come into your system, you're already a step or two up in the fundraising process, because they've already given to you and they've done it purposefully. And so now, they're open to you. And then the next step would be, okay, help them understand, what your mission is and what you're doing and how you're creating impact. And that will then create potentially create a longer term relationship with these donors.
What do you notice about employees when they're using your platform, what they are typing in to get to the organizations that they might give to? What's their search criteria often?
They'll often start with a cause.
Really?
Right? Yeah. They'll say,
something
"Hey,
they know.
I'm interested in helping kids with education. I'm interested in, animal welfare."
So they have a drop. So you have a drop down which will say education.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. So they often start with the cause, and then the system will help them understand the organizations that support that cause, and then the organizations that support that cause in their local area, because a large part of employee giving is local. Actually, a large part of any individual giving is local. When you look at it, I think across the board, it's something like 50 to 60% of individual giving is done locally. And
sorry, you finish what you're saying.
So that becomes an important factor in any nonprofit who's trying to attract new donors, because the local ones are the ones that are going to be giving to you first.
I would assume that the corporations themselves and the employees themselves expect your organization to have some form of due diligence in regards to these nonprofits, to make sure that they are credible and they have some what happens in a situation where there has been foul play going on with a nonprofit? That's not the right word, but something, that's not really great.
We'll call it impermissible.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Well, it all starts with registration with the IRS as a 501c3. You have to go through a certain hurdles in order to be accepted by the IRS as a legitimate nonprofit. You have to submit yearly annual reports, the 990, that helps the IRS understand that whether you're still performing things in a charitable fashion, right? Are you acting as a charity? So that's the fundamental baseline, and that's what we use as our starting point for the database. You don't get in the database unless you're in the IRS Business Master File, which is a list of currently legitimate charities. And then from there, a lot of times a client will investigate further, as particularly if they're choosing someone who is going to be featured in a campaign, right? If you're going to open this up and say, "Hey, we've chosen 10 charities that are going to be featured in our campaign this year," generally a client will want to do a little bit more research on that. And generally what you do there is there's ways that you can look at through the OFAC regulations, certain kinds of things that the government databases that keep track of nefarious individuals and nefarious activity. And that's always a checkpoint of, are the board of directors all in good standing? Is the executive director in good standing? Those kinds of things will be typical screens that we can perform. And actually Blackbaud performs them on an ongoing basis. So in addition to the IRS in good standing, we'll just make sure that all of these tracking systems that the governments run, we keep track of, so that if something pops up there, we'll put a charity on hold.
How many charities are there on the platform?
Right now, there's 1.5 million, and that's 1.3 directly out of the business master file, and then a couple 100,000 of schools and houses of worship that wouldn't necessarily be part of the business master file.
Now, is there a average number that a company would want their employees to see? Like, are they selective about their, I would imagine they would be. I mean, if you have, I know there's, I'm not going to mention any names, but there's one company in particular that refuses to allow their employees to get abortions. And this isn't a recent thing. This has been going on for a while. So they don't, the way that they handle it is their medical insurance doesn't pay for that type of procedure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And so I'm assuming that a company like that wouldn't want, a organization, a nonprofit that's helping people get abortions, right?
Yeah. Yeah. There's a wide variety of reasons why a company wouldn't want some charities to be in their acceptable base. And so what we do is we'll offer it's just a thing that they can sign up for themselves. They can say, we want these criteria to come out.
Okay.
Some of them say no houses of worship, just not because they have a problem with any houses of worship, but they just feel like it's, they want to be secular. Some of them have, there's a variety of different things that companies will do. In addition, by the way, it goes the other way. There's nonprofits that don't want to receive funds from certain companies because it gets out of sync with what their values are and what they're doing. It's not as those companies are perfectly good companies. Those nonprofits are perfectly legitimate nonprofits. It's just that they're not in the same perspective of whatever it is that they're doing. And so what we will do is make sure that those organizations are pulled out of the available list for any given set of employees.
Now, you said there's over 1 million nonprofits on the platform. How many companies are on the platform?
Right now, it's just shy of 500.
500.
And that's all different sizes of companies. It goes from relatively small to multinationals that have operations all over the world.
Yeah, yeah. Where do you think your company is headed? What's the direction where it's headed?
Well, I would say in general, what we're trying to do is, like we said, our mission is to, unleash generosity, and by connecting the donors to the causes that they care about. And I think that over time, what we're going to be doing is helping both employees and the nonprofits see where impact is occurring, so that nonprofits can help demonstrate to employees the kinds of great work that they're doing, and the corporations can demonstrate to their constituents by getting involved with these organizations the good that they're giving back to their communities. So to me, it all comes back down to, how much good are we able to achieve here, and doing it for both reasons of the altruistic reason of achieving the good, as well as the benefits you get from a brand perspective of showing that you actually care and that you're creating some good in the world.
Do you think since you said earlier on that a lot of people want to make donations local?
Yes.
So is there a percentage of the money donated that you can say that backs, I believe you what you're saying. I'm just saying, is it 80% of all dollars that go out through this platform to local charities? Is it 90%? Do you know what it is approximately?
Yeah, I don't have that number specifically from our database, but in studies that I've seen, it's generally in around the 50% range.
Okay. So 50% local, 50% is national organizations.
Right. So the way I think about it is, let's say, Stephen, you went to college someplace other than where you're living now, but you're involved in the community now. So you're giving to the community, but yet you still give to your alma mater. And so then it creates a little bit of a split between where you are today and versus where you're your life has been in the past.
In general, do the corporations that participate in what your organization, if someone wants to go outside of that group to make a donation, do they still match it, or do they say, you know what, we're willing to match, but it needs to be in these approved nonprofits? If you go outside of this list, then, we will give you a different amount, or we will not match.
Yeah, that's a good question. There are, I would say, in the main, corporations are trying to offer their employees as broad a spectrum of charities to give to as possible. All right. So sometimes if they'll limit it, like what the conversation we had just a few minutes ago, what they might say is, hey, you can give to any charity in this database, but we'll only match those, we'll match anything other than these categories, right? Because then they're trying to say, I don't want to control my employees' personal behavior. Yeah. I just don't want to support something that is against what principles that we particularly have. So that's a very common way of doing it, where instead of removing the charity completely from the list, they'll simply remove it from the match.
So now the employees that are making donations, what are you seeing in age donations? So people in their 20s versus people in their 50s. I'm just giving that as an example, but based on generations, what trends are you seeing?
Well, I think it's very similar to what trends you see overall, whereas as you get older, you give more. And I think that's just an element of, people's ability to create wealth, right? Giving is usually something that's...
When we say more, we're talking about the true dollar amount, not a percentage of what they make overall.
Right,
because I don't think
the dollars go up as the age goes up.
Yeah.
So a younger person that's in their mid-20s, that's just starting out, they'll give a couple $100 or something. As you get, the senior manager of a large organization would give a couple thousand, and that's generally what you tend to see.
And as far as causes that you say, what are younger people care about more than you see older people on a percentage basis?
Yeah, I think in general what you tend to see is that people who are older will tend to focus more on education, health, religious kinds of activities, and then as you start shifting down, you're getting a little bit more of a shift towards what I'll call social justice issues.
Yep.
Or very local kinds of issues like poverty and things like that. So they're more of the humanitarian and social side of it. And you see that too, particularly disaster philanthropy is a huge driver of giving and getting people active. So, the earthquake that hits, the terrible, hurricanes that come through and totally disrupt people's lives. It becomes a very emotional thing. And that's one that often drives a lot of young people to get involved and to help out.
So I would say that if you are this podcast is geared towards smaller nonprofits. If you're a smaller nonprofit, that getting on these type of platforms, especially because over 50% of the employees want to give local, right? That getting on these platforms should be a big part of your fundraising strategy.
I think so. I think it's an important part because these employees are your future, right? They're the younger people who are just beginning to start out being philanthropists. They don't even know that they are a philanthropist, but they're starting it. And to know that, number one, it's a lot of it's given locally. Number two, they're starting out. Number three is when they give to you, they're actually they're taking some of their first actions on a proactive basis. Those are all really strong signals of creating some sort of a relationship with those employees. And so to be able to identify who they are, sometimes they're already in your database. and if you can see that people are giving through, in a corporate thing through this simple email description that I talked about, all these programs that I've seen, ourselves and our competitors, the default is the employee says that their name can be shared. They have to check a box to say, I want to be anonymous. So a vast majority of them are telling the nonprofit who they are. And that's just a great start to say, well, let's find out these people in this database, begin to understand them. Then you have the chance to both communicate with them because they gave you a way to communicate with them, and potentially communicate with the corporation that they're working for to get more involved and create great volunteer opportunities and things for their next campaign, because these companies are always searching for new ideas to introduce to their employees.
And last question, what challenge do you think your company has going forward?
Well, I think it's how to use this technology in a way that it just doesn't feel like a transaction, because that it is very much a large number kind of problem to solve, and you often do that through scale and efficiency. And if all it becomes is a transaction, then you don't get to what is at the heart of giving, which is the heart. People want to believe in what they're doing and they want to feel good about it. And if you're just clicking a button, sometimes that's not enough. It doesn't create that emotional connection. So I think that what's a challenge for us is that, and anybody who's in this kind of work, is if you're dealing with the large numbers you're dealing with, you want to create the biggest impact. You want to move as much money as you can to the nonprofit sector. When you're working in business, it can easily move to, okay, there's tech solutions to this, there's AI, there's all these things that we can do. But it comes back to your very first question you asked me, what's so important? You got to know the donor. You got to connect with individuals. And
the crazy part is a 40% turnover of people who donate that don't donate again. And it's just unbelievable that, and so I can see where you're coming from, because you can't control how a nonprofit treats the donors,
right.
And so maybe a person donates and then that nonprofit, I'm being exaggerating, never contacts the person again, never sends them communication, never says thank you, and just keeps asking for more money. Maybe that's the way they communicate, right? We all hate that. Right.
Yeah. And that's just fundraising 101, right?
Yeah.
You don't do those things. You have to create a connection. And my personal situation is just like that. I mean, there's organizations I give to mainly because what they help me understand about them excites me. And they're always doing new things and creating new outcomes that make me feel as an individual good about giving to them. And I think that's a fundamental that is true no matter who you're talking about. And it's important for people like me who are helping connect the two sides to keep that in mind, because that way we can be better at creating the emotion, helping people explore and understand what they're trying to do, and connecting people that think alike.
Does become a point? I lied. I didn't have the last question before. Does it become a point, and I know this is a tricky situation, where you aren't happy with a nonprofit, the way they communicate, and you take them off the platform?
The only time that I'll take somebody off a platform is if they're doing something that's really, that's inappropriate, that's impermissible, that's illegal, that, if they're being investigated by attorneys general, that's they're off until that thing is resolved.
Yeah.
If they're, we'll detect fraud occasionally, and or highly suspect fraud, that we reach out to the attorney general. So those are cases where we'll put them on hold until it's resolved.
All right. Well, that was my last question. So we started off, and I must admit, with me not quite understanding what Blackbaud Giving Fund does, and now I get it. So I would like to thank so very much Matt Nash from the Blackbaud Giving Fund. It's Blackbaud Giving Fund, for coming on today's podcast. And if you like today's podcast, please feel free to share it with a friend and also subscribe on your favorite podcasting app. And if you like today's podcast, please give us a 5-star review. It actually gets the word out. When we're in the top 3% of most listened to podcasts for the nonprofit category. And it's certainly something I was never expecting, and I'm really happy about it. And if you're looking for a line of credit for your nonprofit, please feel free to visit our website at nonprofitmbapodcast.com. And Matt, if anyone gets in touch with you, how would they go about doing that?
Contact information is on our website. It's blackbaudgivingfund.org.
Great. Thanks for coming on.
My pleasure. It's terrific talking to you. I had a great conversation today.
Yeah, and I want to leave everybody, like I usually do, with this idea. I want to thank our listeners for making the world a better place. We all know that we need it. We've always needed it. It's not something new, but we definitely need people like you who are the generals out there, who are the leaders. Make every single day you're trying to make the world a better place. I know Matt and I are doing our part in our own little way. But you guys are out there every single day, and I thank you for that. I just want to remind you that you have to take care of yourself. If you don't take care of yourself first, then you're no good to your family, your employees, or your cause. And so think about that every single day when you get up. You say, what am I going to do? What are you going to do to help you have the energy that you'll need to make this world a better place? So other than that, everybody have a great day. Get out, enjoy smelling the roses. It's springtime right now, and it's so great to not have to have winter, depending on where you are in the country, of course. All right, everybody, have a great day. I'll see you later.